Hi, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Phoenix from Informa Markets. Thank you for joining us today for the Harnessing AI for Shipping session at the Maritime online series. We would like to thank our affiliate sponsor Wartsila for their support and our great lineup of speakers who are joining us today. Before I hand the time over to the moderator, there's a few admin matters that I would like to bring your attention to. And this is intended as an interactive session, so please feel free to ask your questions by typing it in the Q&A box, and the panel will address them at the end of the session. And poll has been incorporated into the discussion, so do participate actively. And lastly, these sessions will be recorded and available on demand at the Swapcard platform post-webinar. So without further ado, please let me hand this over to our moderators, Charles Crouspeyre, Artificial Intelligence Director, AI ASEAN Lead from Accenture AI. Charles, over to you, please.
Hi, thank you, Phoenix. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. Very interesting subject indeed. So to tell you a little bit about myself, I'm leading the artificial intelligence practice in Accenture in ASEAN. I've been working across industries for the last 15 years, from shipping to predictive maintenance to optimization. So I'm very, very happy to be here and discuss with you and hear our panelists. I'll be here to try to lead the conversation. Again, when we're talking about harnessing AI for shipping, it would be interesting to hear our panelists about what is the reality, what is where are we today in terms of AI, in terms of capabilities, between all the noise, what is the reality, what is really practical, how we can implement AI solution. Is it a myth? What are the enabler? What are the constraints to consider when we are considering building an AI project or an AI use case? What are all the accelerator and all different elements to consider? I'm really excited to discuss with our panel today about all those different topics. First, Phoenix, I'm going to ask, as Phoenix mentioned, we're going to have a poll. So Phoenix, can you start the poll? Okay, here we go. So we're gonna use this poll to know you a little bit better, to interact with you, to know who we are, who will be listening, so we can also modify the content, obviously, and the sharing based on that. I don't know, Phoenix, sorry, if I'm supposed to receive the update on the polls now, or if we're supposed to review it at the end of the call. Really sorry about that, but
no worries. Yeah, no worries. We can give a few minutes for our audience to vote, and then we can launch the results after the panelist introduction.
Okay, perfect. So yes, absolutely. Let's introduce our panelists. Thank you very much, the panelists, for joining. First, we're gonna have, as one of the panelists, we have Hideyuki Ando, who is director of MTI and leading the R&D arm of NYK Line. Good afternoon, Ando-san. Could you tell us maybe a little bit about yourself?
Good afternoon, Charles. Thank you very much for your introduction. Yes, let me introduce myself. Myself is belonging to MTI, which is a research and development arm of NYK Line. And NYK Line itself is operating about a little bit less than 800 ships. And the role of MTI is to improve the operational efficiency, safety, and then those variety of matters of improving NYK fleet operation. So, and then we have about 50 people who are doing many researches, and together with industry partners. And then my background is actually, before I joining MTI in 2005, I was associate professor at the University of Tokyo. And that time, actually, I was researching about actually like a computer supported supporting cooperative work, CSCW, and also like data mining and machine learning. So actually, originally I was educated as a naval architect. But so today's subject, I mean, how are we going to utilize enhance the industry by AI? And the computer is actually my very like a lifelong subject. So actually, I'm very pleased to participating in this panel. Thank you.
That's really great, and really looking forward to hearing from your very long experience also.
Thank you.
Second panelist, please welcome Dimitris Tsapoulis, who is the Chief Operation Officer at the Signal Group. Hi, Dimitris.
Hello, everybody. Great to be here. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I guess a few words about myself. Like Ando-san, I quote unquote crashed into shipping in 2005. By background, I'm an engineer. I spent about a decade in London, working in capital markets and technology and financial services. In 2005, I came back to Greece, where I come from, and I kind of started my process of falling in love with shipping. First, from the vantage point of a fully integrated big ship management company, where I faced some of the challenges that I eventually moved on, to solve while being with Signal. So we started Signal in 2014. Signal is basically a group of companies or a group of startups that are trying to find meaningful application of AI and of technology, basically in shipping. We launched commercially in 2018 a decision support system, a software as a service system. Cloud, I think, has been catalyzing in bringing what we're going to talk about to a wider audience, many industries, and certainly including shipping. So basically from Signal, we are trying to discover exactly what the role of AI can be in shipping. And we predict that this is going to be a pretty long process, but we are very excited to be looking into that.
That's awesome. Thank you very much, Dimitris, and it's great to have you also and to hear from you about all those great subjects. Then we have, please welcome Claus Nehmzow, who is the Chief Innovation Officer at Eastern Pacific Shipping. Hi, Claus. Can you also tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Hi, Charles. Definitely. My background, actually, for those of you who know Singapore, is the view from our office in Singapore. I'm Chief Innovation Officer, as you say, but also run the IT team, which is a little bit more mundane, but really important. I joined in October 2019 in this role. Before that, I worked in oil and gas and was involved with music startups like Shazam, did a lot of consultancy in different cities around the world, been in Singapore since 2014. Before that, I lived in Hong Kong, New York, London, Zurich, originally from Hamburg. Eastern Pacific EPS is a 60-year-old family-owned shipping company. So we own and manage about 160 ocean-going vessels, headquartered in Singapore. And one of the things we do innovation is through an accelerator that's just opening the doors for the third year of applicants that we do jointly with Techstar. And that's sort of the main way that we engage with innovation. That's it from my side.
Amazing, really cool to have you also today on this panel. Thank you very much, Claude. Finally, very important also, not the least, of course, Chung, who is the Director of Ecosystem Development and Strategic Project at Wartsila. Hi, Chris. Can you tell us also about yourself?
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're dialing in from. So I am looking after the ecosystem development and strategic projects for Wartsila Voyage. We're split into three parts. One part is the power, the systems, and I'm in the Voyage. What that actually means is that, we really look after the vessels from end to end, port to port, not just on the vessel level, but also on the shore side as well. So a lot of the technologies that we develop actually really enable us to look wider than just the vessel. And this is a lot of the times where we apply the AI technology as well. And my prior experience with that was before Wartsila was actually with a class society. Regulation, of course, is very important in the maritime sector, but also sometimes a barrier. So I can speak a little bit about that, but an enabler as well, of course. And prior to that, I was with British Gas in UK, and prior to that was in Telstra, a telecoms company. So been looking at big data before it's even known as big data, and data analytics, and the AI applications as well. So great to have the opportunity to join the panel. Look forward to the discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. It's great to have you. It's really great to have you. So thanks very much for everyone to introduce. We're going to start in a second. I just want to remind our audience that you can ask a question. You have the Q&A option or function, so don't hesitate to ask questions. We will probably address some of those questions at the end of the session within the last 15 minutes or something like that. Anyway, let's start. So very interesting. All of you have mentioned that actually you have been doing data mining, analysis, and so on for quite some time now. So there is obviously a lot of buzz around AI, but what do you see? What do you think is the reality of the AI, and where are we in terms of AI adoption or AI capabilities today? Ando-san, if you started from the university world to the more industrial, would you like to share with us on that subject?
Yeah. Okay. Yes, that's a great question. I think yeah, when I started 2005, actually there were not many people realizing the value of the data itself in this industry. But eventually, like NYK, we are like operating, and then actually there are potentially we can gather a lot of data from ships. But actually, but still, the perspective of data minings are not yet realized that time. But my impression is in the last 10, 15 years, actually, of course, there is a momentum of big data is coming and so on, but more and more awareness actually rising about the data. And also myself and NYK itself also started data collection about 2007 or 8 by utilizing automated data collection system. To grasp the actual performance of the vessel. And then so we collect like a navigation data and also like engine like fuel consumption data automatically from the vessel. And then last 10 years, actually more and more like availability of continuous satellite communications are there. So actually we can rather easily collect the data from the ships to shore. But at the same time, actually, so now I can say the situation is more, we can easily collect the data. But at the same time, actually, and then now there are nice tools, and also we have good domain knowledge and so on. But then what we're gonna do? That is actually always, the issues. So we have to identify the right issues to solve. Otherwise, there are plenty of data, there are plenty of tools, but actually still matching the actual business or operational issues with those data, combining those two are very much, we need some chemistry of those business sense and also data into some solution. But that chemistry is a little bit still missing. That is my impression.
And what do you think needs to happen to help enhance this alignment between the capabilities and the...
I think now again, people, the business section and the operation people are realizing the value and also the existence of the technology. So now the gap between the two different disciplinary things are a little bit closing. So now somebody who understands well about like engines or like a daily operation realize the possibility, potential of the data. So they start some improvement their business operation by utilizing AI. So that is what we are observing. And also the other side, like data analysts, data scientists or data analysts are realizing and gradually understanding the business domains. And so they are proposing more like a tangible, practical solutions to the business domain people. So both cases we are observing. So I think now gradually those two gaps are closing. So I think now it's a good timing that and then potentially we can see more solutions. That is what I feel now.
Is it shared by the rest of the panel? So we have some more startups or smaller level companies. Do you face the same challenge, Chris, for example, or Dimitris?
Maybe I'll build on Ando-san's point, which is a really good summary, and I really, I think it's a great summary of that. I think the other trend that I'm seeing is actually over the past year and a half with the pandemic, it's also really accelerated not just the technology, because if we're being honest with ourselves, outside of maritime, if you look at retail, e-commerce, et cetera, actually the technology, the maturity is actually there. A lot of the technology is available for the maritime industry to actually adopt, but it's also because of, like Ando-san said, it's the domain knowledge, the problems we're trying to solve, and the drivers behind the change of that. So take, for example, actually, we all know that crew changes is very difficult now. Even getting field engineers out there is actually very difficult now. And in the past, there's a lot of resistance around, hey, actually, no, remote connectivity to the systems. What are you talking about? They actually want to deploy physical people, etc. And a lot of those mindset have radically changed over the past year and a half. So I think from an AI perspective, the sensors are there. We deploy a lot of sensors integrated. The connectivity is increasingly, getting better and better. Cloud, I think Dimitris sort of mentioned about that, is leaps and bounds for a lot of adjacent industries that we can tap into. But now really it's about both the domain knowledge coming together with the data team, solving real world problems. And I think two other things that we can work on also is around the data standards in terms of speaking the same language, as well as the whole upskilling of the digital workforce, not just the technology team, but also the maritime team together to solve problems. I think is a great acceleration there. Yep.
To add to that, perhaps one of the things that AI systems typically need is lots of data to get trained and get better and better. So we have a whole bunch of companies in our accelerator. One of them is using high-frequency data analysis and Nautilus labs from the engines and generators and so forth. And of course, the more we install it on our ships, the more data we get, so the models can get better. And another one is not so much using data in the traditional sense, but video. Called Captain Eye. They do computer vision in real time to detect non-compliance with PPE, those types of things. And of course, the more data, in this case, live video footage you have, the better the systems will get. So that's kind of another thing, that it will get better over time as you deploy the systems.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, Dimitris, sorry.
And I mean, I love this, let's say, traversing of the space, because I agree with everything that my esteemed co-panelists have basically deployed. What's interesting, I think, is, of course, machine learning concepts have been around since the 50s. It is data, availability and quality of data that actually breaks the barrier of making something meaningfully applicable. What's very interesting, and I think Chris talked about standardization. I love the fact that you have ecosystem in your title. I think it will take a village to raise technology in shipping, and you can standardize data, but you can also standardize protocols and therefore facilitate some pieces of the puzzle coming together, because you can't possibly build everything on your own. But for me, an interesting angle is that still data in shipping flows over interests. So it's not really out there. There are all sorts of strange commercial situations or lack of, commercially available data. Things like ESG, like all of us coming together to protect the environment, has basically indicated that we may get some data sets to do collective work. But if you think about AI, it is so, in its current form, it is so dependent on available data, on volume of data, on quality of data, and that's not the case in shipping. That kind of raises the bar. It means you have to have higher quality science to treat the data, to make sure you're not, putting garbage in, garbage out, and so on and so forth. but in a way, if you do find your way, you know, alongside some true problems that, like Ando-san talked about, even if they are a vertical, you know, if they are localized problems, then you almost remove the need for what I think is not a realistic expectation for people to come together, you know, despite interests or despite market structures that have self-organized around non-sharing of data. So I think the type of technology that we have in our hands right now, and we didn't have 5 years ago, and the type of talent, you know, like the data scientists that are looking into, you know, truly doing high or deep tech work, then you can almost bypass our inertia and our lack of resolve to collaborate sometimes by allowing the data to showcase what you can do. You can solve some problems that you couldn't solve before. And I think that's what the industry needs initially. It needs some people to almost bully their way through some successful cases and then create a snowball effect, because everybody's watching the space and wants to be active in it. But I think it's going to take some you know, use cases, successful use cases. It's all about stories. Humans love stories. So if you can actually tell a story and be credible in saying that this problem that we couldn't previously solve was solved, it created value, it shared value, then that's what we need. And I think that's where AI is in shipping right now.
That's fantastic. I apologize. I'm just going to interrupt the flow just for a second. We're going to have the result of the first poll. So please, Phoenix, share the result with us. So people with us today are, okay, in majority others. So that's not but otherwise we have, yes, ship owners and ship managers, AI and data solution providers, fantastic, industry associations, startups, and port and logistic also. Okay, great. That's great to see. Yes. So Dimitri, to jump back on what you were saying, I love, because you mentioned, I mean, the equation is almost on one side, the type of technology. So the technology plus the talent plus the data will help to solve whatever equation we have. In terms of tech, what are the trends that you're seeing? Obviously there is sensors, but what are all the different things that are really driving those use cases or successful use cases?
Wow, I mean, I'm struggling to wrap my head around, you know, the tree that this question opens up. It's, I think, I'm struggling to find areas that couldn't, let's say, benefit from seriously looking at what these new emergent, you know, technologies can do. In terms of trends, I think I'm going to be, you know, like, I'm going to create a bit of an anticlimax. I think in shipping, you know, even if you go to war with, I don't know, regression, you can do an awful lot, let alone, you know, all the crazy stuff that are happening around, you know, the strands of AI that we are seeing being successful. You know, there is narrow AI and, you know, like deep learning and shipping having organized over, you know, a pay per character sort of satellite telex system that created a whole complete language, especially in, you know, in commercial terms. So, you know, technologies like deep learning, but other strands as well, can help you there to understand the language and prepare it for computers, perhaps removing the need for everybody to talk the same language or to standardize, because right now, you know, I think you can actually, you know, effectively teach a machine to adapt to the variants of that language. So certainly that's one strand of technologies that can be very useful. And everything in, you know, around path planning and any type of predictive sort of domain can help you nowcast, which is, you know, super valuable. Understand what's happening right now in shipping, let alone, you know, predict the future, which is, I think, you know, a very steep challenge. But even by appreciating what's happening right now, I think teams can be helped to switch gears, to start learning faster, and so on and so forth. So, you know, one of the applications that I'm really sort of kind of in love with is what we're doing at Signal. You know, at Signal we have a B2B software as a service that we, you know, sell to market participants, but we also have a commercial ship manager. And although this is not directly relevant to what exact stack it is, I think we have an ensemble of about 7 or 8 different types of machine learning and AI that we use. But what the result is that I've seen people come, you know, to a shipping company and take up to 2 years to become part of a chartering desk and be trusted with taking ships to spot markets and so on and so forth. But for me, an amazing, encouraging mark is the fact that I've seen girls and guys coming in from universities and over 2 or 3 months learning at a much accelerated pace with the aid of technology and the support of more senior people, and becoming autonomous and performant, you know, quicker. So I think that concept of augmenting and you know, putting technology to assist people to understand things that have self-organized and nobody has really written a book on, I think that's great. And I don't think it matters if you're using the you know, like the strands of AI that are going towards general AI or superhuman AI and so on and so forth. I think it matters to solve practical problems and sometimes hide the complexity behind good UX and so on and so forth. So with regards to where shipping is and what the technology trends are going to be, I think it's going to be about cleansing and preparing the data, storing the data efficiently, then trying, you know, the algorithms that are already state of the art. You know, you don't need to go crazy on that, but also caring about user experience. You know, people in shipping, you know, don't have a huge appetite to first have to understand what random forest or boosted trees is before they can, I don't know, trust or mistrust the system, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Claus, on your side, you also have a lot of innovation going on. Is there also some, I mean, we're talking about when we are at sea, for example, there is all the progress on edge computing and so on. Is it also something that has become a key enabler, or how do you see that versus all the other use cases potentially?
Yes, it's interesting because with the lack of connectivity on ships, which is still one of the challenges until Elon Musk solves that problem too, there is, particularly with sort of power-hungry, computer-hungry applications like AI, there is the need for edge computing because we can't have, you know, a live video stream being analyzed in the cloud somewhere. So definitely that's also with, you know, technology costs coming down and edge computing becoming more powerful. It's definitely really interesting. Dimitri had an interesting point there. If AI can leapfrog sort of the complexity and the deficiencies of technology, like in data standardization, for example, that reminded me of a story at BP. We had all this old sort of 20, 30-year-old information stored in all sorts of, you know, obsolete formats on some PCs about wells because they last very long. And until then, it was sort of pretty impossible to analyze this. And then the advanced AI systems came that had enough knowledge about the subject matter domain that now they could sort of take on the task and translating that into something that, you know, can be understood. So I think there's, you know, a lot of that potential that AI can sort of leapfrog the limitations that we have. But yeah, edge computing is definitely one of the key trends for us. And I think another point that Dimitri touched on is, you know, onboarding and training. I think in learning and helping people to faster understand an environment or to detect weak signals, that's kind of where AI and an assisting role to human operators can also be really helpful.
So the AI is not here to take over, but to detect those weak signals and raise the flag, right?
Yes, although it's probably the borderline is probably a bit blurry at some point once they do all the tricky thing, and we're sort of just guiding, and they just give us a few choices. I mean, they could probably make the choice themselves, but the question is, do we feel we're in control, or are we still really in control, and should we be in control fully? But yeah, I think the assisting role for a long time is really where tremendous value will be added. In some cases, it's also funny because as we're offering more and more technology, like the high frequency data analysis, we're ending up with so much information that probably another AI, you talked about UX, another AI has to step in to decide which information in which context is important enough for the human to be even presented to. So that's kind of another role I think the AI will play in the future and has to.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, any application on your side where you see exactly the combination of human plus machine that helps, or even sometimes that I'm imagining, sorry, I'm considering, you mentioned Elon Musk earlier, Klaus, and I'm obviously thinking that the problem of self-driving car becomes the same with self-driving ship at some point. So is there any cases similar maybe that you have explored, or where the human becomes so important, or raise even ethical questions, or we are not there yet?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Let's start with the the discussion about human in the loop first. And I think in the examples that were sort of discussed previously, I think we are getting to a stage where actually there's no shortage of data. Right. If we want it, we can actually have a lot of data, be it high frequency data or actually video data. We can actually have terabytes and zettabytes of that. So that's not necessarily the challenge. And actually what we do is, especially for our machine health, predictive maintenance, etc., it's really a good collaboration between the IoT capability, getting the right data at the right time, at the right frequency, getting the AI to understand the weak signals and actually, flag some of the anomalies, and actually coupling that with the expert, with the domain knowledge. I think this is where AI does magic, because it's really enabling a lot of the things that is just nearly impossible for human to do, and vice versa. The actual human gets to concentrate on the expertise that is high intelligence, if you like, and high value adding. I think that's one part of it. The other thing around the sort of whole available of the data, and this comes back to maybe Dimitris, the other trend that I actually see is that even though we collectively won't have perfect data and standards, etc., actually I am beginning to see, for example, IMO and the port authorities starting to move together. They may not actually have this exact same vocabulary, but actually, they are more and more enabling data to be exchanged on a port level, on a consistent level. And governments are actually driving that as well. So that's actually a really encouraging sign. And whether it's actually companies or users or startups, actually everyone has got more or less the same data set. I think that's quite encouraging. Now, coming back to the whole kind of then using of the data for other purposes outside of the vessel. So one of the other things that we see also in terms of AI is the whole just-in-time arrival. So we're talking about whole ecosystem level optimization. For example, we've seen a number of recent events whereby supply chain has been disrupted, either because of Suez Canal incident or actually, COVID shutting down or reducing the capacity of ports. And this is actually where the availability of real-time data, both in terms of the fleet going to a particular port, the ability to understand the nowcast in terms of where they are, whether they're affected by weather, and their estimated time of arrival. You're able to optimize on the shore side, and vice versa. If the shore side is not ready, actually the information about a recommended time of arrival again plays a very important part on the fleet level to optimize. And again, this is where AI also plays a role in terms of optimizing that and taking into account all sorts of different data sets in real time, and then actually nowcasting, but also then predicting the various scenarios so that the human can actually make the most optimal decision. So those are some examples around it. You touched on the whole towards autonomy front. Yes, we do see a lot of development on AI, whether it's actually visual, recognition of objects, collision avoidance, etc. We believe it's a journey, and actually there's some very exciting things going on at the moment. But again, we believe it's a journey, and I think we need to keep in pace with both the customer, but also on the regulatory side as well, and work in tandem on that front. Thanks.
Ando, may I ask you, because as you mentioned, your company has more than 200 fleets. So how is it applied in your group?
Yeah, actually, NYK is operating a little bit less than 800 vessels. However, the whole data collection is actually we installed the data collection box about 200 ships actually, because our own vessels actually it's more easy to access to collect the data, but our charter in vessels normally the owners may not like to install those data collection systems, so it's about that. But anyhow, and regarding our ship, our own ships, and then 200 ships. And it is also relating to your what you mentioned, human in the loop, and or Chris mentioned human in the loop, or what we call, actually we are calling it expert in the loop, because by utilizing the 200 ships data, we like last 5 years we are trying to utilize those data to find like some abnormal phenomenon from the data, that for like a condition-based maintenance or something like that type of things. And then our actually expert chief engineers are leading our big data team. And that team, together with data scientists, have worked so far to analyzing the data, and then labeling the data, and then if actual trouble cases, they put label or annotation. Okay, this data is the good training data and so on. But so far, actually, of course, even we are collecting those 200 data. Actually, data is not enough to cover the whole possibility of, because this is a power plant, propulsion plant, and all potentially all failure modes of component or equipment potentially be there. But actually, what we can get from the data is just a part of it. So potentially, still, actually, data itself, what we have collected so far, does not include the real error data, abnormal data, which we would like to find. But AI can, in that sense, actually, it is a bit difficult to deeply learn from the actual the cause and effect from the data. So. But still, the AI can say something that, okay, now situation is something wrong, but do not know the reason. That is kind of like what the AI can do. But still, it is good support the expert. So who knows, who has who can investigate the actual reason based on the data, can utilize the advice or recommendation by AI. So combining those kind of like a weak AI recommendation and the strong domain knowledge can probably complement each other. That's what we can do at this stage. But again, the data itself does not inherently include all the errors, all the trouble. So actually, we have to generate somehow by using a simulator. And then because nowadays actually digital twin technology is also very good. So actually we can actually generate some abnormal situation for each failure mode. We can actually predict by by virtually make that trouble cases on computers. So that data also could be feed into AI or computer software. So, well, what we are now trying to do is like somehow by utilizing the data, actual data from that 200 vessels, At the same time, we are running a lot of simulations by battery designed, modeled, and then that makes a lot of trouble cases. Probably we may synthesize those two different sources into a more better like predictive or anomaly detection algorithm. But anyhow, in the meantime, domain experts are utilizing all those output from the AI to find out something's wrong and estimate some background reasons. So that is what's happening now, I think.
That's great. Sorry, I was reading. There is a question actually. I think you answered it. There is a question asked by someone from the audience regarding: do you think it's necessary to have a human to supervise the AI data? So I think that you reply that yes, actually at different level, to look at the quality, but to look also on the type of the outcome expected from a model based on the type of data. So yeah, great. So that's great. But where do you see then the industry going? Because it seems now that you have pretty much, okay, the data are coming in, the data pipeline, the architecture is here, the algorithm, as Dimitris mentioned, are there. It's nothing, you don't have to use the latest in the university world to implement. Where do you think, what is coming next within 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? What do you think we're going to see in terms of capabilities enabled through different use cases of or application of machine learning?
I think one of the things that hopefully we'll see is that people will no longer talk about AI as a special, separate thing. Hopefully it will become so ubiquitous, just as a very powerful and further increasing capability that will, because it's such a broad range of application, that it will just power a lot of things. You know, similarly, we don't talk about a database anymore and many other concepts. So I think it will, you know, increasingly be integrated, become ubiquitous, and no longer really be treated as a special new thing. I think that will be a sign of that it finally has arrived, that it will be integrated.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I think you closed, Charles, on the point where, you know, do you need a human? And I think very astutely you said, you talked about quality, so of inputs, let's say, but also you need to measure the performance of, let's say, any AI system in order to iteratively improve it. You know, I think over the next 2 years, if we look at shipping and you look at the two general, let's say, organizational domains, you have commercial and then you have technical. And in technical, I think we are seeing, you know, amazing possibilities with regards to the value that can be created from preventive maintenance, from optimization, and not only, you know, like the sensory part and the, you know, direct feedback loop, but also bringing the human in the loop and telling the crew on board how to optimize, how to trim, how to, you know, sort of voyage plan and arrive and so on and so forth, by actually crunching in tons more than you can do with, let's say, the human brain. Signal is certainly more active currently in the commercial space, where there's a lot of empirical trading, you know, hugely experienced people that have gone through shipping cycles, understand the markets intuitively, in shipping as in many, you know, like in the adjacent commodity space and other domains. You have huge asymmetries where one side knows more than the other. And for me, all these domains are fascinating because, you know, it's not that you're going to do, you know, like the Uber or the Airbnb for shipping and create a, you know, marketplace where people are going to go and get their 360,000 tons oil tanker or their crazy, you know, like 10,000 TEU container showing up at the doorstep in 10 minutes. That's never going to happen. But what is going to happen is you're going to be able to progressively find pockets of value. Let's say a section of shipping hasn't consolidated as much as it could on one side of the marketplace because they couldn't solve a mathematical equation. Let's say, think about commercial pools, like people bring their ships together to manage financial risk and exposure better, but they invariably, have a row and go away really pissed off because they thought their ship was more eco and needed to be subject to a bigger sort of profit margin than a ship that was 20 years older. But like fairly distributing proceeds in a pool is a very, very hard thing to do in an industry that is as opaque as shipping is. So it's not only machinery and optimal state of machinery, it's also showing people through solutions that weren't possible before what it means to collaborate on a fair basis, to exchange value, all the way to society and the environment, of course, which I think is going to be increasingly an element. I think in the world right now, there is much more entrepreneurial activity that is looking to make profit while also not doing bad or even doing good. And I think, shipping occupies an amazing position in global commerce, carrying everything we have around us. And I think there will be space for AI to also help, create more sustainable and profitable situations. And I'm not sure if that's in 3 years. We talked about driverless cars, and I know Singapore was one of the first cities that actually tried them. We are actually very indirectly involved in that. A lot of the systems we build have taken inspiration from driverless cars. We don't drive ships, but we want to predict where they're going to go. But if you look at the state of driverless cars, it's not, one step away. And it's not one step away because people are scratching their heads. Ando-san, I think, talked about traceability, and the expert, can we understand why this statistical algorithm, especially the statistical part of AI, is suggesting this recommendation, not really sometimes. So I think, in my opinion, in the next 3 years, we're just going to see this momentum play out and just wait to hear success stories and see if those success stories can basically create some themes of successful applications and potentially also show us, the things that shipping is not ready for, or the way that it has self-organized might look to a couple of guys from Stanford like, oh my God, what are these people doing? But it actually might be very deeply systemic as to why the market structures are working in this particular way. So I don't think fireworks in the next 3 years, but a very, very interesting, let's say, natural selection of successful applications of AI.
Yeah, that's very cool. And actually, it's not fireworks, but if you start considering things not as unity, but start working as a network, either within a company or between, that's already quite a significant change of mindset. So that would be interesting to see. So we'll take you for your word and judge in the next 2 years where we are. But we received a few questions, 2 questions actually. So let me ask the first one from Captain Adnan. Do AI may send or transmit wrong signal or informations, and what are the measures for the human to understand the behavior of the AI? Who wants to take on this one?
Yeah, I could have a quick view on that. So one is important to understand how AI works, and particularly in the early stage where it doesn't have enough training data, and even later, there are these famous examples where one pixel that the human wouldn't see made the AI think, it's a totally different animal in sort of animal recognition. So that's kind of an example that, you know, it's not black and white, it's not binary, it's not 100%. The other thing, it typically returns sort of probability that something is what it thinks it is. So it's not like with an AIS, it's switched on or off, it's binary, it's there, it's not there. It's a probability that it is this ship. And it becomes a question of software design, at which point I say I don't know what it is, although it kind of thinks it might know what it is, but it's not 100% sure, or where to say it is. And then you have to deal with false positive. And those things are very different from many other systems, and it improves over time. And so most human operators are really not used to that kind of system behavior and need to know about it, need to understand it. That's one way to deal with it. And then the other one is to have multiple systems. So, you know, in sensor, it's called sensor fusion. So you take the radar, you take the actors, you take AIS, and you take the computer vision from the AI-enabled system, and you decide under which context something is more plausible than others. If there was no chip, you know, anywhere, then, you know, maybe it's a false positive. So it's a combination, I think, of understanding how AI systems work, that they get better, and integrating them with many other things, including sort of just software design and plausibility checks. You know, does it make sense that it's 300% better? Probably not. Those types of things.
Yeah, I agree. There's no such thing as perfect AI, and you know, you need to go through the whole cycle of training the model, but also, you know, validating that against kind of like the ground truth and testing that. You know, this whole kind of like genre of kind of like testing with confusion matrix, etc. So absolutely, you know, AI is not perfect by any means, but it's a tool, and it's an ability to predict based on lots of information that perhaps a human mind cannot process in a very short amount of time.
Yeah, also I'd like to add, I agree with the Chris, the all comments, especially on the comment by Chris. The more and more, I mean, the validation and the verification of the system is important, especially for critical systems. So the role, I mean, so we need to define the functional requirements and the performance requirements, and we have to test the AI if that AI can pass the test or not. That is, I think, very important.
Yeah, thank you very much for those answers. Second question, or third question in total, is a very interesting one, actually, related to the business side, actually, is how to effectively measure the returns from all these AIs and technology investments. Very important. Who wants to give it a go?
Maybe I can start with some examples, and you know, and anyone please chip in. Let's take, for example, you know, one of the areas that for sure we do a lot in is around the whole making sure and working with our customers and helping our customers ensure that the engines and the critical infrastructure is as reliable, uptime, and if something goes wrong, be able to troubleshoot very quickly, right? You know, uptime, availability, reliability is super important. Now, especially as I mentioned, you know, over the pandemic, it's really difficult compared to the past, you know, 2 years ago, year and a half ago. In those times, you have a lot of super experts flying around, going to ports, jumping onto vessels, going on the journey, and actually doing a lot of troubleshooting on site as well. Now, a lot of that is very difficult now. Crew changes, port, you know, incredibly difficult. And also, you know, that's enabled a lot of data, and a lot of customers who previously say, you know, actually, no, don't touch, you know, do not connect anything. But actually, you know, we are seeing a lot more data coming through, and the ability for AI to help sift through those high frequency data to find the areas of concentration, and to Ando-san's point, then the experts really looking at the right thing, connecting again back real time with the crew on board and working with them to troubleshoot. Actually, you can just imagine the avoided downtime. And also imagine if you couldn't do that and you have to go to a port, wait, get, you know, 14 days clearance on you know, quarantine, and then kind of like the ship can't move. That's a very straightforward sort of ROI. The other thing that I can maybe point out as an example is that we talked about the whole efficiency and carbon reduction. Today, a lot of the vessels are sort of connected, But let's say, for example, if you much like NYK own 800 vessels, you have a massive fleet. And actually, to be able to optimize the fleet based on the voyage, taking into account real-time data on weather information, on whether the other side of the port B that's receiving you is ready, and whether you need to slow down, a lot of that data and the ability to orchestrate a fleet and actually reduce your operating costs, reduce your fuel, and therefore reduce your carbon emission is very tangible. And actually, even a little bit out of 800 vessels, for example, actually adds up to a very significant sum. And vice versa, you can say the same with the port side as well. The ability to get real data to optimize the port infrastructure, the utilization, etc., actually has got huge benefits. So hopefully that shares a bit of my perspective. Anyone?
I have had the privilege of seeing many examples, in my stint in the industry, with the ship manager that I served, and now through our customers and our own sort of shipping arm. And I think first and foremost, if you are going to get down and try and deploy AI and leverage it, I think you need to budget for some time to do benefit tracking. So benefit tracking is almost always pretty arbitrary, but showing people dollars, I think, caters not only for worrying to make sure that the performance of the system is good, but also it kind of lubricates the change management effort that needs to happen around, so that if, let's say, you are trying to optimize arrival for a ship and there is a recommendation from a system, then if you show the master on board that they could save $12,000 while not risking operationally, like the notice of readiness or anything like that, then I think you actually switch people into gear much faster. So in a way, if you build benefit tracking into a system and then you aggregate, then you can track a proxy of the value that systems add. I mean, in our case, I remember earlier in the year, what we do is basically we give signals to people trading in spot markets with regards to short-term predictions about how rates are going to fluctuate. And practically, the way you can track impact is the following. Like when we track supply of ships 10, 20 days ahead in a loading port, and in the space of 2 weeks, we basically saw what looked like a leading indicator or signal that the supply of ships was going to dramatically drop below normal, let's say, levels. And that signaled to the people who did the actual chartering that they could not take last done today. And this is something that a good player would have done anyway. But basically having the system, showing it to your manager, rationalizing and doing an evidence-based of why you're going to wait not 1 day, but 4 days before you fix your ship that is coming up, to be employed next, is something that creates a discussion around some data, and you can actually measure the outcome. And in that particular instance, I think we measured, the team produced $400,000, a result that superior to, let's say, the top quartile human led decision making, because it created the resolve to wait when potentially somebody would have been frightened to do so if they couldn't explain it to their manager, and so on and so forth. But that case of creating almost $500,000 of benefit in 2 weeks, you need to not be fooled by it, casino style. You need to also go back and see the cases where you waited and something different happened. And then you need to statistically blend those to understand if you are creating an edge, and then measure that and the benefit, on aggregate. So for me, that type of approach is critical, because like Claus said, the outputs of an AI system are statistical. They will be right 70% of the time. So you need to be aware of that process when you're going to track benefits, and not only count the successes, but also, mix in the failures.
Thanks a lot, Dimitris, also for this answer. I know we have one more question. It's 5:02. So Phoenix, I don't know if we can address that question or.
Yes, yes.
Yes, okay, very quickly then. So a question from Erwin. AI being a powerful tool for the industry, what qualifications of users should be there to enable adoption and a broader application in the maritime environment?
Statistics and more data science, I would say.
Yeah, and in a contrarian way, I would say nothing, because if the data scientists, have been inspired even by other domains, and they come in, then they need to be integrated into teams that speak the shipping language, create a user experience that is productive and doesn't actually require people to know too much about. But I think that's not to undermine what Claus said, that you need to understand in the beginning, and in early adopters will invariably need to have a higher level of understanding so that they can manage the risks and carry the rest of us on their back.
Next one. I think design thinking and user experience design thinking, I think, is super important and totally neglected, particularly in shipping, I think, so far.
Yeah, I also agree that the design thinking is very the key way of thinking. And also, I think somebody who leads the project is also necessary in the business side.
The technical and the problem-solving domains, yeah.
Diversity and inclusion.
Yes, indeed, indeed.
Okay, last one, I think. Also, AI has a broad scope. What areas is shipping focusing on, and what is the timetable for ship owners to realize benefits? And that will be the conclusion of this conversation.
I think any application having to do with sustainability, which often goes hand in hand with cost reductions, so fuel consumption and so forth, is one. And another one I would think is seafarer health and safety applications.
From my perspective, certainly,
okay.
Also, top line optimization, in the trading context of shipping. So certainly there, I think, in markets such as shipping, you can get a lot of help, producing more predictable and sustainable performance. Sorry,
Yeah.
Chris.
Understand, please go.
Oh, thank you. Sorry. Yeah, I think anyhow we are in the era of big trends of digital DX, the digital transition, and also energy transition. So those two big waves, anyhow, we have to survive. So I think those are the two main areas. I think. Yeah.
And my last build perhaps is that it really depends on who you are in the value chain. Whether you're ship owner, ship operator, ship manager, shipyards, ports, and actually AI application would differ slightly. But what I would say is that actually we would absolutely, well, at least I'm very optimistic to see that AI would be a lot more used. And hopefully fall into the background, because the best technology is the ones that you just forget about it. And actually today is 7/7, and I don't know about you, but huge amounts of e-commerce is kind of like launching the apps, and there's huge amounts of AI technology behind the scenes. No one even thinks about it, right? All the recommendations just to, hey, buy more money, buy more goods, and better for our shippers, of course. But those are the AI technology that just disappears off in our life, and I would expect to see more and more of that in the shipping industry as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for sharing with us about this great topic and getting those insights to our audience. Very interesting indeed. I see that Phoenix has appeared. I'll give it back to you. You're on mute.
Thank you so much for all our panelists for the very insightful discussions, and thank you for everyone of joining us today and some of the very interesting questions. And please join us again next week for a series of topics on environment and decarbonizations. And also a quick reminder to let you know that our call for entries for both the Seatrade Awards and Seatrade Maritime Awards Middle East, Indian subcontinent and Africa, both now in association with Loisleys, are still open. But deadlines are roaming, so please do make sure you enter ahead of the deadline, which can be found on the website. And thank you and look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Guys.